do is use the resources we have to bring down our carbon footprint, our carbon bubble right now. We need to take advantage of every single thing that we have to pull down the impact that we're having on the environment. And we need to do it very, very soon. And it is unfortunate when you hear people talking about the fact that the recession is actually very good for the environment because there's less driving, there's less purchasing, but that is not what it's about. It's about we don't need or want a recession in order to be good to the environment. We want to make choices that allow us to be healthy and happy and fed and employed that are still good for the environment. We can't equate purchasing of goods with what it means to have a sustainable society. Oops, sorry. So, just to refute this a little bit, about the whole issue of embodied energy and new construction and how important new construction is. And I don't quibble with the idea that if we are building new buildings, they absolutely should be the most effective and environmentally responsible and right size and passive and smart as they could possibly be. They're a terrible use of resources. So for heaven's sakes, let's do it right. But the point in this conversation where we say, oh, it doesn't really matter because 10 years from now the embodied energy is just a small part of the operating energy, then that's what you hear oftentimes in the green community, which is overly fixated on the new. And this shows the different, it's high operating, that it still takes about 10 years for it to equal out in energy before that flat, the sort of violet line is the line of energy and requirements and resources that it took to make the building, and then the other is what it takes to operate the building. But if we really start looking at this and thinking about it and understand that the next 10 years are incredibly, incredibly important. It's moving so much faster than anybody expected. The United Nations, the reports have just become more dire with every passing day. We really have to think very carefully about how we're using our resources in the next 10 years. And that means thinking about whether we need to build. I'm applauding some of the universities and the facilities directors around the country who, instead of planning for new facilities, are planning how to better utilize the facilities they have, who are asking their departments to break down the barriers between them so that a conference room might not be defined as the English conference room or the German conference room. It might be a conference room that anybody on the campus can schedule, and you don't need to have 5 conference rooms or 6 conference rooms if 4 of them are going to be vacant most of the time. A nega building, a non-building, is the greenest building we can possibly do. Now we know that preservation is good. We've all been there. We've been fighting the good fight. We're using the statistics. We also know, and there's pretty strong evidence of this, that renovation creates less carbon. It's got a small carbon footprint than new construction because although it does create a significant amount of waste, more waste actually than new construction in the direct construction, that waste is more and more being reclaimed and repurposed. And the waste that was created by the new construction is often hidden waste that doesn't get to the construction site. And we know that when you're actually doing renovation, it's very labor intensive. That's good. We know that that uses less carbon. People are better use of our resources and skilled labor rather than products. There's a study that came out this spring, or actually was revised this summer, that Patrice was part of, that was the life cycle assessment study of the embodied effects for existing buildings, 4 buildings in Park Service in Canada. And the Athena Institute, who does a lot of life cycle analysis, looked at these buildings and did a life cycle analysis of what would be the avoided impacts of renovating these buildings as opposed to building new construction. The avoided impacts for 4 buildings of very different sizes are quite substantial. The avoided impacts for one is the energy use of 85 homes for a year. That's a substantial avoided impact. The avoided impact of reusing buildings when you've got 1,000, 1,500 houses for a year. That's substantial. Now, just to make sure that they were looking at it thoroughly, they did also look at it in terms of what its energy production could be, what the renovated buildings, how they could compare to the energy use, the direct energy use of other buildings, both new and renovated. So it still comes out very well. Many of the historic buildings that we're talking about reusing are very high mass. They lend themselves, they have high ceilings, great daylighting, they're not unlike this, and they offer an opportunity to take advantage of that and improve the performance. I've often said that historic tax credits might be the greenest legislation we've ever passed. When you think about the number of dollars we put in, the fact that those construction dollars used less, created less carbon, and also created more jobs, that they created more housing, that they brought housing into our inner neighborhoods. We know, you know, in Virginia, that preservation is good. Good for the environment, and good for the economy, and good for the happiness level. Preservation works. So we've got to keep that fight up. We know that it builds communities. We know that it gets people out walking. We know that it gets people talking to each other. But it's not enough. Just in the same way that if we recycle everything, it's not enough. Because what we really have to do is we have to change our purchasing power. We have to change the way we're buying things. It doesn't help at all if we keep on buying everything and just think that it's being recycled. Actually, most of it doesn't get recycled. I don't want to, there's the Debbie Downer again, but it often goes into an incinerator. The incinerator is actually a very pollutant force of creating energy. It is not a good thing. So what we really want to do is break the pattern. We want to understand what we need to do. We have to understand we have a real responsibility as preservationists, not just to save buildings, not just to stop there and say that's it. We have to understand all the nuances. It's a very complicated world out there. We have to think beyond just our normal preservation to operation and maintenance, to health issues, to issues that integrate all of the pieces of environmental sustainability. We certainly need to understand what we're doing on the sites and what we're doing with cars and what we're doing with pollutant runoff that's going down into our waterways and into our soil. We need to be able to adjust, and we need to be able to be creative and flexible. And too often, as a preservation community, we hear the word preserve and we become the obstructionists. We need to educate ourselves. We need to understand what our flex is going to be, and that different buildings are treated in different ways. Not every building is a National Historic Landmark. Not every building is precious. And even when they are, they have different opportunities. We have, over the years, we have adjusted our buildings to work with new technologies. We have done this always. We have changed from candlelight to electricity to incandescent, and now we're changing to LEDs. We've changed from coal heating to wood heating to four-pipe steam heating, and now we're changing again. We need to keep being able to change. We are first and foremost stewards of change, and we have a responsibility to be informed and active in how we do that. But most of all, we have a responsibility to be activists, to be agents of both change that is perceived as not changing, because this is really what we're used to doing. It is never easy. These conversations that we're going to have in the next few years will continue to be very challenging, and they will continue to be energetic, and they will continue to be confrontational in some cases. But we do have a real opportunity here to explain to the world that stewardship is not a luxury. Stewardship and the care of our historic buildings is not something that we choose to do after the economy is better, after we fix the environment. If we don't embrace stewardship and we don't help the rest of the world embrace it, we will never be